Okay, good morning everyone. Tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome. We're going to start.
Please stand for the karakia from Tāmai Kaumatua.
Tēnā koutou katoa I tēnei ata kāhui te mihi atu kia koutou I te manu kāhui tēnei te mihi atu kia koe hoki koutou e pupuru I ngā kōrero mo te tāone o kirikiri roa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. E te atua kaharawa anei mātou e tuku whakamoemiti kia koe kia manāti tia mātou katoa e huitahi nei. Hei arahi I te taone nui o kirikiri roa. Whakatōngia tō wairua tapu, hei arahi, hei tohu, hei āwhina mātou ki te tutuki I ngā moemoea mai te rangi ki te whenua. Ko koe tō mātou piringa, ko koe tō mātou toka tū moana, arahi mātou I rungi te tika me te pono, I rungi te ingoa tō mātou kai whakora, mo ake, āmini. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to let you know, we're going to kick off with inaugurating Councillor O'Leary. We were sorry that you couldn't make it on the day, and we know you were desperately ill for a very long time actually, so it's good that you're back in fine fettle and able to hopefully enjoy your inauguration this morning. So what do we do? What's first step of that?
So if Councillor O'Leary can just come through over to this table over here with New South Gate.
Me Porter wasn't a rep.
Oh, you just want me to read straight into it?
So just read this.
I was going to say I full name. I, Angela O'Leary, declare that I will faithfully and impartially and according to the best of my skill and judgment execute and perform in the best interest of Hamilton City the powers, authorities and duties vested in or imposed upon me as a member of the Hamilton City Council by virtue of the Local Government Act 2002, the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 or any other act. Nice and quick.
Thank you, Angela. Feel free to say a few words to your colleagues.
I can make decisions now, can't I? It's great to be here. I was trying to think of that Australian movie, the one where the guy and they've got the kids and they sell things and he goes, it's the vibe, it's the castle. There's a good vibe, there's good marbo with this new council and I'm really excited to be back. I won't take up too much time. Paula has my full support and I thank her, for giving me infrastructure because now it's my problem for every pothole in the city. Thank you for that. And reducing speed and annoying all those wonderful motorists because when we get behind the engine of a car, we're all experts. So thank you for that. That's going to be a challenge and I have big shoes to fill. I do need to apologise to former Deputy Mayor and Councillor Martin Gallagher. His very good friend Ewan Wilson said to me throughout the campaign, there's one thing that that Martin is most concerned about, and that's losing the top pole on the west. So I sincerely apologise for that, Martin.
Congratulated you on the night.
Yes, you did. He did. He called me up and he said a former councillor who he tipped off the top didn't call, but he called me. So Martin, you'll always be top in my eyes.
Tell me streaming.
Tell me streaming, yeah. So look, I'm really excited. Welcome to all the new councillors. Your enthusiasm and your passion and your gender, I have to say, is a welcome to me, certainly. I know nothing to do with you, Richard. When I started, I think there were 5 elected women and we've dropped, and so it's nice to have a really good balance around the table, and it's great to see some old but new faces in Ewan and Margaret, and I'm really stoked and happy to be here. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. And we welcome Angela back. We know that she will put 110% in. Thank you for the strong campaign that you ran. Thank you for giving me your support, and I know that you'll do an excellent job in infrastructure because you'll understand every nook and cranny of it within a few weeks.
No
Right, isn't it exciting that we're all established now as a full council and we're good to go? And by the end of the day, you'll have also your positions. And apart from some tweaking here and there with some bits on the terms of reference that might happen, we'll be pretty soon roaring out of the gates with all the exciting work that we're going to do. So I'm very excited about what we can achieve that way. So this morning we have no apologies, everyone's here. Confirmation of the agenda. I'm just going to move the LGFA one back because we're expecting a visitor at 10 o'clock to speak to that, and we will go into the governance structure. Sorry, and I've missed declaration of interest. Is there any declarations of interest? Wouldn't think so. No. Okay, we have no public forum. You are welcome to come and join us at the table if you like. You're one of the fold. You fine? Yes. Okay, cool. So, yeah, move the agenda be accepted with moving those two items around. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Thompson. All in favour? Okay, thank you. That's it. So we're now going to move on to item 6, which is the governance structure, which you're going to talk to, Richard?
Yes, I can get my agenda to open.
I'll just say a few sort of introductory comments in terms of the structure. Most of you were at the induction, day 2 of the induction, and so you heard some of my thinking and were able to talk with me about that. But what I'm endeavouring to do here is to spread the workload in a fair and even way. And as far as practical, and people won't always get their first choice, but as far as practical, to match people to their values, aspirations or skills, so that they feel that they've got something worthwhile to achieve here and can put their full effort in and their full enthusiasm. Because Angela's absolutely right. We've got an awesome feel about this council. We've got uplift in energy. The fact that so many of you have been calling me, asking when you can get going, what your scope is, and just chomping at the bit to do the work is absolutely awesome. So that is good. And as I say, the things that I have thought about is the match of skills, a flatter structure, a fairer structure. And also, the other key point to consider is that structure must work with the staff structure and the organisational outcomes. So we can't be at odds with that because we need the best support of staff possible. So we need the best alignment with what works for staff to support us as well. So having said that, I think we've landed on a pretty good structure. I'm happy with it. I hope that you're happy with it. And I look forward to getting this through and getting on with business.
Yep, so the only thing I'm going to add is I want to just congratulate Mayor Paula for pulling this together. I first met with Mayor Paula the Wednesday after the election, and this is all but baked at that stage. So it was quite exciting to hit the ground running and go hard on this. So that was really good. From a chief executive point of view, it does align with the structure. Also provides a closer relationship to the advocacy program that we've been running in council for the last few years in terms of engagement with central government and other agencies as well. So it means now that we've probably got a more of a direct spokesperson for key issues aligned with the deputy and the chair of those committees with the advocacy work we've been doing with central government and other agencies as well. So for me, that aligns quite well, Mayor Paula. So that's all I have to add to what you've added. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, I suppose?
Are there any questions, councillors? Sorry, I'm just getting me get to the discussion. Councillor O'Leary.
It's me. Thank you, Mayor Paula. Just 2 quick questions. The makeup of the 3 hearings and engagement, Economic Development and Environment Committee, when will we have an idea of those?
This afternoon when we talk about
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And also, in the past, I think the past couple of terms, the Mayor's always set a bit of a review date, and I'm just listening to what Richard was saying in terms of government, and of course we know, I mean, this should be based on our priorities, not central government's, because we know there's an election next year. So do you think you will, have some kind of review in the future?
Yes, so possibly it should have been in here, but to review in a year, not
Okay.
because I'm expecting to
No.
toss people out or to move people around. It was more to make sure that, because we've done a little work on the terms of reference, just to make sure that that's driving the way it should do and that the focuses are where they should be and everyone's happy with that. So within a year. I have made a point and made it quite clear that I could review sooner than that, and I hope I don't have to, on the basis of a couple of things that I don't have any tolerance for, and that is for the leaking of confidential information. I think if you're in a position of leadership, you should not leak confidential information to the public. It undermines the good work of the rest of the council. And I believe nobody here will do that, because I think you'll be passionate about your work. The other part is that I hope we will be a council who responds to the requests for respect of each other, play the issue, not the person. Same with staff. Ask the hard questions, don't attack the staff. And when our public come into the arena, to also respect them. It's hard for the public to come in here. We're a formal structure. Often they're already anxious. It's not their familiar arena. And I've had a lot of feedback about that in the past. And I'd like to think that we can all pull together to be a respectful council. So if there was a major transgression in any of those areas, it might force me to review a position sooner.
Me Paula, comment made by Councillor O'Leary, absolutely correct. I totally agree with you that our advocacy should be about our issues with the central government, and effectively that's what we've done. We've effectively shifted central government views. I'm hoping this structure will give us more leverage to do so. So yeah, I'm quite excited by that opportunity. Yep.
And it is my intention in setting chairs to give the chairs access to the same conversations at government. I know the mayor goes down and leads conversations there, and they should. But having other informed parties to support that seems reasonable and effective to me. So, Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Thanks. Following Angela's, the terms of reference will be our best guess at what goes in which area, but there'll be also a number of issues that overlap. I'm just wondering how you envisage sorting them out between committees. Is it going to be left to management? Which report goes where? Is there going to be a bit of discussion with the chairs, between the chairs, that sort of issue?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Dave, because I know that not everybody has seen the full suite of terms of reference, and I think that will become clearer after the conversations. That it's taken longer because I have tried to include feedback along the route. And a number of other reasons it got quite delayed, but absolutely become clearer once the terms of reference are there. But my understanding is there will be overlap from time to time, and I would expect the members, as leaders of their own portfolios, to be able to talk collaboratively with each other about those and negotiate with the general manager concerned. And you know, what's wrong with that? The chair and deputy of environment might say, well, we need to talk to the chair and deputy of community on this matter, and you would caucus on it. I think that's fairly common practice, actually.
Okay.
And you all have the skills to do that, I know you do, so I'm quite comfortable with it.
Could I add into that question?
Yeah.
Yep. So ultimately, from a structure point of view, if nothing can be agreed, the terms of reference are designed that things fly up to council. So that's just the default if we can't agree. The other aspect is there's some stuff that's deliberately designed in the terms of reference to ensure there's cross-committee responsibility. So, for example, economic development and the impact of development contributions may be considered from an economic development perspective there, but go to the Strategic Growth Committee from an overall discussion about that. Same with the environment and so forth. So there's some stuff that's deliberately structured in a way to encourage debate at certain levels about certain aspects of a topic, but then to go to another committee for the whole to be considered. So that's sort of an intent of the way the terms of references have been structured. So that outcome is probably a goal rather than a negative byproduct of this process.
Yeah. The other question I had was in relation to outside committees that we're represented on. I'm not sure when that's coming through, but that's my question. I'm not really too worried about it'll happen, but what we found during the last term especially, and started doing something about it, was that the knowledge, if someone's on, say, a regional transport committee or whatever, it's sometimes quite hard to get the full picture across to this council from that, and we started encouraging other members to attend those meetings and to receive the agendas and so forth in advance. So I'm asking that we can encourage that right from the start this time, so that we can help spread, amongst those that are interested at least, spread the knowledge of what's happening in all those. There's dozens of bodies we're represented on.
100% support you in that position.
Thanks.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Your Worship. Regards to terms of reference and the likes, procedurally, so what happens from here? So, like, this is the first time I've seen my committee's ones. Are these, do we feed back, or
Well,
is
yes,
this
you've got an appointment this afternoon,
So we've got a 20-minute appointment this afternoon.
and then it will go into an agenda
Oh, okay, so it
for
comes
the
back for...
28th or whatever
Oh, okay.
that is.
All right.
So it'll go through the usual process there.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you.
Hopefully, my intention is that we resolve any unresolved issues before that, so it's a pretty sweet ride through, but of course it'll go through council.
On the 28th? Great, thank you.
No one else? Okay, thank you. Can we have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Taylor, Deputy Mayor Taylor, all in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the proposed remuneration. And it's pretty self-explanatory. We did talk about this also at the induction. The 6 in the brackets is $6, isn't it, David?
That's correct.
Because, yeah, so it looked like 6,000 to a few people. And we're wondering why we weren't being paid it. But it's $6, and I don't think it'll split very well into 13, so we might leave it.
I'll buy everyone a scone.
Okay, extra couple of packets of chocolate biscuits. Okay, so just in setting, most people heard me talk about this too. The intention is to not have any councillors without portfolios of work or responsibility. So the structure is a lot flatter and the differentials are smaller between chair, deputy chair, and of course there are no ordinary councillors, for want of a better term for that. So it is what it is, and the sooner that we can approve this, it gets off to the Remuneration Authority, and you'll get back paid to the amount that you should have been paid to. You've been paid on the base amount of a councillor at the moment. So that'll be nice. Any questions? No? Somebody happy to move?
I'll move, Your Worship.
Councillor Wilson, Councillor Forsyth, all in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. That's that then. And we've got the gentleman coming for the...
We could probably kick off.
We'll kick off.
Yep.
If there's any questions that I can't answer, we'll just move on to park those and come back to Mark. He'll be here at 10 o'clock. Morning, everyone. The paper before you represents a request for approval to or decision in terms of how Hamilton City Council, as a shareholder of the local government funding agency, would like to vote on the topics raised in the papers. Whilst self-explanatory to some, it is a complex topic. I suppose for those new elected members, the Local Government Funding Authority was established late 2011 for the sole purpose of providing better access to funding, so councils could have the best and cheapest and longest term debt possible to pay for the things that council does. The paper before you talks about a couple of key things. One is the rotation of directors, and in the papers you'll see that there are requirements for directors to rotate off but can be re-elected if they choose to nominate, of which the shareholder council has recommended that we accept that. If we think about the Local Government Funding Authority as being a financial institution, there are significant technical skills required, as well as more broad business acumen skills required for our board. The Local Government Funding Authority is quite complex, and so access to the right individuals to be directors and to actually do a great job for all of us as shareholders, it's a smaller pool. So shareholder council, which is a representative of all shareholders, there are 30 shareholder councils in the LGFA. The shareholder council are supportive of those directors being re-elected. In terms of the remuneration, the board has not had an increase for the last, until 2017 was their last increase. So shareholder council engaged with an external party to do some market analysis, and the papers you've got before you is recommending some minor increases. So that's a decision that we need to decide how we will vote on when the AGM occurs on the 21st of November. I should say the reason this paper has come to this committee is pretty much fallen because of the new triennium and not a lot of options for us to get a decision from council before the 21st of November. And I realise it's pretty hard reading for those that are unaware of the LGFA and trying to get their heads around it. So I do apologise for that. The final leg to the decision required from council is around lending direct to CCOs. So council-controlled organisations. The Shareholders' Council has worked with the LGFA and legal representatives to understand and develop a framework such that no increase in risk would occur to any shareholder with the LGFA. If we paint a picture of what happens today, before we talk about what's been asked of you to make a decision on, today CCOs cannot borrow money from the Local Government Funding Authority directly. So what happens, and there are a few councils that actually borrow money from the LGFA and then on-lend that to a CCO. Currently we have no visibility of that from a whole of shareholder perspective, so when we have a look at the annual report you'll see that there's a whole listing of borrowings from councils and what percentage of they have of that borrowing, but we have no visibility of that. We also have CCOs that are entering into commercial lending agreements with banks of the like, in terms of the cost of funds would be more than they would have to pay through the LGFA, and the actual term of the loan would be a lot shorter. Providing CCOs access to LGFA provides them with cheaper funding and for longer dated loans. The CCOs as we have them at the moment are governed by a statement of intent that comes to council, and that signals the requirements in terms of the following year, in terms of how what key initiatives that they will enter into, and what financial arrangements they're looking to enter into as well. So council gets an opportunity there to comment and approve the statement of intent, and that guides the direction of the CCO in terms of how it operates. In actual the LGFA loaning money to a CCO is no different from than what happens today, apart from the fact that CCOs get access to another funding body at a cheaper rate for a longer rate. There's no increase in risk, and so the LGFA felt that to honour its purpose, to innovate and provide local government with best services possible around the financing of loans, that they would go down that route. Key point is that this avenue of funding only relates to CCOs that are 100% owned by councils. So there's no joint ventures or other commercial party structures with CCOs that LGFA would enter into. And that was a key component and a key requirement from the Shareholders' Council in terms of supporting this. So the benefits for this council would be that, and I would only envisage that the airport would be the only CCO that would ever engage in this type of borrowing. You're getting transparency anyway, but you're just getting cheaper funds. The actual risk to shareholders across the LGFA will not increase. So happy to leave it there and take questions, and hopefully I've got a couple of questions I can't answer so that it would justify Mark driving down from Auckland to support the paper.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. So the difference being that CCOs could potentially borrow from LGFA. Yeah, you're right. We've only got the airport that would really affect us. You mentioned that only if it's council-owned. Now, the airport's owned by several different councils. I presume that's the same.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Is there capacity? Because there's some pretty big CCOs around, like Auckland Transport, for example. massive. Is there the capacity? And is
CCA
it likely to affect our...
There will not, it won't have any impact on council. The LGFA itself has grown in strength to strength since 2011. Its lending book now has assets, as you would have read, of over $10 billion. So it's a significant institution.
So it can handle it?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Just the other thing to add is that they're not going to be changing their criteria in terms of the level of creditworthiness of these companies as well. So they're requiring them to achieve a certain level of credit rating before they lend into them as well. So the level of scrutiny that we're required to go through as a borrower, they will too.
Right.
So any of the 100% owned CCOs out there that are a little bit marginal, probably won't have access to the funds.
Got it. Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe?
Yeah, just a question on the rotation of directors, and from a shareholder council point of view, which of course you're a member of that shareholder council, do you think that there is a proper rotation going on given the changes in the financial market around SPVs and so forth, that some new blood coming on to the directorship of LGFA would at this particular time be useful? And I appreciate your comment that it is quite a specialised area, and there won't be a lot of directors who would have that specialisation.
Yeah, it's a great question. My view on that is that having that expertise around the LGFA and its purpose and how it's been set up and how it operates is significantly advantageous for the LGFA to be able to meet the challenge of differing financial structures that central government is talking about providing. We do have a non-independent director, Mike Timmins, who's from Timmins, I think it is, from the Wellington Regional Council, which is significantly involved in local government and discussions. He's a previous CFO and works in their treasury area. So my response would be that we're fortunate to keep hold of the directors that we've got. They do a fantastic job, as we've seen in the performance of the LGFA, and that they're best positioned to deal with the changing environment at the moment.
Okay, and these further questions that I've got, if you prefer to leave the answers to those to the gentleman who's coming in from the council.
I think we should ask him one question.
He is here now, is he?
No.
No, okay. So the first question I've got is, in terms of the new shareholder agreement that's attached to this, is there any change in Hamilton City Council's position around the joint and several liability that we have,
No.
that we currently have, to fess up for losses that might occur when other councils default?
No change whatsoever.
No change, okay. And that limit, I know that we've got, from past discussions, there's a limit to our joint and several liability. That's not changing either?
No.
Okay, okay. Are we on notice that any member council with a loan might be likely to default?
No.
No, okay. The shares are unpaid by all counts. I think the government's the only participant in LGFA that seems to have paid up its shares. Is there any sort of indication that we might have a liability? There might be a call for those share payments?
Not at all, no.
Okay. So they're still operating with unpaid capital?
That's right.
But we would have that liability, wouldn't we, and that liability would be ahead of any call that we might have on our joint and several liability?
That's correct.
Yep, okay. On page 77, the agreement refers to Standard & Poor's ratings, but doesn't mention Fitch, who of course rate our council.
Yeah.
Are we disadvantaged in any way by using Fitch as opposed to S&P in terms of any concessions that we might get based on the rating that Fitch give us?
It's an area we're thinking about at the moment. I don't believe we're at a disadvantage, but my comment would be that I'm not sure we're maximising our opportunities. S&P do understand the local government market, and they do rate 24 out of 28 of the councils that have ratings. And those councils have over 95% of the debt in the local government sector. So, the LGFA itself has a rating from both S&P and Fitch of AA+, same as the New Zealand government. But there's a piece of work going on to determine whether or not it might be the right time, given the conversations with central government about different financing vehicles, as to whether our credit rating agency, whether it's still fit for purpose, or whether there'd be some advantages with us going down the S&P route because of the context they have in New Zealand and the knowledge they have with the local government sector. So I'm going through and doing a piece of work on that at the moment, and I'll bring that back to the Strategic Risk and Assurance Committee through to Council at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Councillor Forsyth.
That's fine. I don't want to speak now.
Oh, sorry. Councillor O'Leary.
Oh, thank you, me Paula. There's been some criticism over during last term from Residents and Ratepayers Association, and on occasion some others, in terms of why the bulk of our funding is through the LGFA. My question is, do we or do the board regularly look at what the market is doing, how they're performing? I know that, isn't it, we signed up with the document to take 80% of our debt through there? Was that the right figure?
100% of our debt goes through there.
It's 100% of our debt. Okay, so can you...
Our policy, yeah.
Yeah. But so that's it. So if the current market is offering better rates, we
would come to council and ask for the policy to be changed if we thought that there is better advantages to do that.
David, I thought our policy allowed us already to go as long as it meets certain criteria. So
That's
our
correct.
policy is based around borrowing from organisations that have a certain level of financial integrity, and so we could already do that. And so the requirement with LGFA was initially based on set up to set a certain value.
Yeah.
We've exceeded that value, so we can go and do what we like now in terms of we borrow from.
That was the case.
And to David's point, LGFA, and also go through to the shareholder council, actually do reporting against their point benefit against the market.
Okay, good.
So they do a significant level of reporting in that space. And the risk of having our debt with, there's no additional risk of having all our debt with LGFA because of the financial arrangements they have in place. They're effectively a back-to-back borrower, and they're borrowing through multiple organisations. So effectively they're an agency that gives access to a whole range of offshore and onshore borrowings as well. So whilst we do LGFA, they're effectively an agency that manages through bulk and efficiency to deliver better rates to us. So the Resident Ratepayer Association concerns are probably mitigated a lot by that aspect as well.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Paula. Look, my question is just in regards to the benefit that local government has derived from this facility over the years that it's been in place. I recall when it was first debated and discussed about local government agencies working towards this funding mechanism. Can you give any insight over the period that it's been up and running, the types of savings that local government have enjoyed as a result of the differential interest rate than the former model where we were going to the market in terms of quantum?
Now, right now.
I can see.
It's one of my words. I've got 3 or 4.
Not right now, but I can send you some information. One thing I can say is that the establishment of the LGFA has had significant gains for councils by getting access to cheaper funding. So I can't quantify that right now, but I can do a piece of work and email that out to everybody. So
Just at a high level, Councillor Ewan, is it's had a direct benefit. So those councils that borrow from LGFA have had point advantage over the market. Second benefit is it's driven the market down. So there's actually other councils who are not members of LGFA are also experiencing better rates of return because they're effectively supply and demand.
Great. So I guess a subsequent question, if I may, Mayor Paula, could you give me a current snapshot of what the commercial market interest rate is and what we're enjoying in terms of a member of the local government funding agency as of today?
Could we park that until Mark gets here, because Mark will have that knowledge? I don't have that right. Oh, here we go.
We're saving a question for him.
Hey, Mark, come up here.
You're at the front. Up here.
We've been small talking.
Can I please ask that no one asks any questions they've already asked, because we don't find out that David didn't know what he was talking about?
That's not true.
Okay, so we'll
Of course.
good morning, welcome.
Good morning, thank you.
We'll continue with Councillor Wilson's line of inquiry, and then Rob will go to the question that you had, and I know that Sarah, you're waiting for a question too, because both of those questions were directed at you.
So maybe best to
Give them context,
introduce, get the context. So Mark Butcher, Chief Executive Officer of the Local Government Funding Authority. So staff, if you like, as opposed to the board. So Mark has been obviously right in the middle of this this conversation, and Shareholders Council have worked very closely with Mark to get to this result. But there was a question from Councillor Ewan.
So Councillor Wilson, if you would like to just give the context to your questioning, and then that gives Mark a little bit of a warm lead-in.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, Mark, welcome to Hamilton. My question related to try to quantify the current benefits that local councils who are members of the LGFA are enjoying versus what they could access on the commercial market. Sure. And I first asked about, you know, is there any indication or any insight as to the economic benefits that we, as in Local Government Inc., has enjoyed over the years that LGFA have been in place? And if we weren't able to articulate that, could we at least give a current snapshot of what are we enjoying currently over what the commercial market would be paying in terms of interest rates? Because when this came up originally some years ago, there was some real aspirational goals to be able to borrow money in a more affordable way. And it looks, and I have a feeling it is working well for us. I'm just trying to get a better insight on what that is.
Okay, yeah, sure. We have now got loans to the local government sector of almost $10 billion. And we were set up late 2011, started to lend 2012. We're finding at the moment that probably it's around about 20 basis points, about 0.2% per annum, relative to going out into the market by yourself. So that means on the sector, on our council borrowers, that's around about $20 million per annum. So over the last 7 years now, that's equivalent to about $140 million of savings, cumulative savings. The other aspects, though, are the ability to borrow longer as well too. So when we first set up in 2012, councils would borrow somewhere between probably 1 year and maybe 5 years. You can now borrow out to 14 years from us. So that better matches your infrastructure. But the key thing is your infrastructure is 35 to 50 years long. If you only have a 5-year loan, then you've got to roll that loan over 7, 8, 9 times over the life of the infrastructure. If you now borrow for 14 years or 15 years, you've only got to subject to refinancing risk twice maybe. And then the third aspect, which is probably qualitative, and we don't want to ever test this again, we were set up as a part of the Capital Markets Development Task Force and the Job Summit in 2008, 2009. And that was at the end or during the global financial crisis. And at the time, it was quite hard. The banks became rather choosy and over where they would lend to. And so the idea for us is to also provide certainty of access to the councils, that if they want to borrow, then while we cannot guarantee that we will lend you, we do have a stronger obligation than what probably a normal bank would, because we're obviously owned by councils, we're there for council. So it's the certainty of access to market, it's the longer dated funding, and it's the cheaper funding, which we can quantify at around about 0.2% per annum.
If I can ask one more question. This move, which on the face of it I certainly support, to enable CCOs to access this lending facility, by their very nature, they are more commercially engaged in their activities, so slightly higher risk profile of activity than the types of activities that most councils engage in. Is there any best practices or other examples around the world where we can try to quantify the likelihood of defaults, or whether it's a heightened risk, just to give us some more comfort? Because all we're saying is we're extending them the same benefits that we've enjoyed since 2008, which according to you today is significant. Yeah, but I'm just wanting to make sure we've tried to understand all the risk components.
Yeah, okay, so the safeguards will be in place. So we're not doing anything different to what CCOs can currently do now. So for instance, Auckland Council borrows and on-lends to Watercare. Christchurch City Council borrows and on-lends to Christchurch City Holdings Limited. So the actual activity is already happening. Bay of Plenty Regional Council borrows and on-lends to Quayside. So all that we're doing now is that because 47, I think it is, of our 64 councils have got CCOs, some are already actually doing this, we're sort of saying, let's make this a lot more transparent. And so from a, and you've got to look at it, I think, from Hamilton City Council being a guarantor. So you're exactly right. Is there any additional risk? Any CCO we lend to has got to still have a guarantee from the parent council, or it's got to have uncalled capital if it's a CCTO greater than its liability. So the ultimate risk is still back on Auckland Council, the Watercare, Christchurch City. From what we're doing, though, it's greater transparency, because for a CCO to borrow from us now, we have to undergo a rigorous credit process and ongoing credit assessment of them. So we will treat them as if they are another council borrower from us. We don't have to lend to a CCO as well too, so we can actually turn them down. We'll be publishing the list of all our CCO loans as well too, so the council can look at it and sort of and start to question us as to, well, how come you're lending to Whanganui Airport or something like that as well too. So and then the big thing for us was more about future-proofing it, because what we realised when Waikato Water was going through the discussion stages a couple of years ago, we could not lend to a jointly owned CCO. So we would have to lend to the various councils in the Waikato region. They'll then have to on-lend it down. So now, so long as something like Waikato Water will be 100% owned by the councils, they can then get the benefits of what the parent councils were. So that's the rationale in 3 minutes. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe, let's return to your question and I'll come to Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether there were any questions I asked that David felt uncomfortable about asking, but I have got a question around challenges to LGFA with alternative forms of finance that councils might consider in the future, and this is looking at off-balance sheet lending, SPVs and so forth. Are there potential challenges there to LGFA for a council like Hamilton City Council, where we have got debt with you, and we might pursue funding through SPVs and other similar types of funding options?
No, and we actually welcome that because we're taking a whole of sector approach in that the sector needs to put more infrastructure in. It needs to look at off-balance sheet financing activities. We are working with the Treasury at the moment and the Infrastructure Financing and Funding work stream to see what role LGFA can actually play in that. Our current position is that we can't lend to those sorts of vehicles if they are established in the current format. And again, you've got to put on your hat as a council guarantor that those lending activities, they're not being backed by rates, whereas every loan we make is backed by rates or a guarantee that is backed by rates. So this is our current position on that. So hence we're working with central government as the ways around it. There's discussions around, well, can those charges being put forward for SPVs, could they be classified as a rate? The other thing we're considering is whether or not we would set up a similar vehicle to LGFA, but completely separate, and see if again we could actually help facilitate some of those off-balance sheet sort of vehicles as well too. So so we don't see the challenge at all. You got to remember, not every council is going to be pursuing off-balance sheet SPVs. We've got 65 council members, going to end up 68 in the coming year. It's only going to be the high growth councils which will probably look at those off-balance sheet vehicles.
So just one further quick question. You don't see any conflicts that could arise if, I mean, a council like Hamilton City Council would be, as I understand it, quite an appropriate council who might look at SPVs given our growth issues and the need for that infrastructure to facilitate that growth. You don't see any conflicts that could arise in terms of the current levels of borrowing and the future borrowing that we might do with LGFA and this kind of debt coming in to our residents on certainly property transactions?
No, because you're always going to have a level of senior debt that you're going to require from LGFA. So the SPVs, the off-balance sheet vehicles, are going to be used more for growth, infrastructure and growth assets. So don't see the conflict at all.
Could I ask a question just off the back of your question, Councillor Rob? So the question is, does LGFA have any views on the affordability burden of certain sectors of the community having to pay a rate as well as some sort of special purpose vehicle contribution, whereas LGFA is set up with a rate that guarantees the debt, or debt that's guaranteed by rates, yet we've now got another charge, the same ratepayer for another set of borrowings through another vehicle. Have you thought about that, and what are your comments? So your question at a different angle.
Yeah, it's so long as there's transparency and consultation, so long as the users are understanding what they're being charged for, then we don't have a problem with it, because our issue, I suppose, on behalf of the sector is the lack of alternative revenue streams to be able to facilitate borrowing, to facilitate the infrastructure. So I think we've sort of said in the past, even in this room, I've been criticised in the past for the fact that I think user charging is a requirement, is what happens overseas, and it's the only way you can do it without putting additional burden on the ratepayers. So that's kind of our strong view on this. And the idea of user charging and separate charging is that you can then ring fence those assets and actually see the true cost of delivery of them as well too.
Thanks, Mark. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. My question, I've got a couple. One of them was in terms of the, I guess, in terms of the board, so David was saying that there's a relatively niche pool of people to be choosing from in terms of candidates for those director positions. Is there any I guess, mentoring program in place or some kind of way to be bringing in new people from diverse backgrounds in particular onto that board?
Yeah, so we've thought about this. So I was originally on the establishment board, and I was on the board before I took on my role. And probably the problem we have is that it's a very technical, niche, specialist provider, and we are, I think, now the 6th largest lender in New Zealand after the 5 major banks. So, and we've had discussions with the local government minister on this as well too, about diversity and what role can we play. It's something I think that the board will have to consider. We've sort of more been focused in the last 7 years on growing, establishing the business. We're now reaching a bit more of a mature stage. So, so we haven't yet come to that conclusion, but it's something that we probably will have to think about. So I'll take that away and reflect that back to the board at the board meeting next week. Okay. There's probably a need for a bit more, mentoring diversity.
Thank you. And the other question was, in terms of, say, next year we'll be coming back to issues like this, I presume, David. And what will be the process then? Because this is, I guess, kind of our first real meeting after being elected as councillors, so we haven't really had much of a lead-in in terms of being briefed about this or having any input. What would be that process?
Yeah, note my apology in the sense of the first council meeting. You've got this heavy topic. We'll certainly arrange a briefing to bring all those that would like to understand more around the LGFA. We'll have a briefing and get Mark to sort of like explain more in more detail. The CCOs have been shifted from the Finance Committee in the terms of reference through to the Economic Development Committee, and so that regular reporting comes through that committee.
Okay, thank you.
Just context, one of the reasons this came up is just make sure there's clarity of delegated authorities. If it wasn't for the delegated authority regarding the rem increase, we wouldn't be bringing it back through council, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't hold these guys up by not bringing it up sooner. So a bit of context needed to be provided.
And I still think the offer, though, David, to have a bit of a deeper look into it is relevant, especially, as you say, we're now focused on alternative funding opportunities going forward that we're going to be more aggressive at looking for. And economic development will be looking at how we fund the activities of local government in this high-pressure situation that we're in now. So I think it is very relevant conversation. One question I did have... Councillor Forsyth, you go. Well, one question I did have was just in terms of the appointments of the local government funding agency boards, the councils, Auckland Council, Western Bay of Plenty District Council, when and how do you're seeking us to approve that at the moment, but when and how do those nominations become open, or I mean, we're just going to not things wrong to say rubber stamp, because these are very good appointments. But when would the opportunities, as you say, to reflect on a wider representation be?
Yep. So the Shareholders' Council, the members are not individuals, they're councils. So David sits on the Shareholders' Council, but it's actually sitting there representing Hamilton City. There is a rotation so that every year 2 councils, and the longest serving councils, come up. So through a 5-year term, you can have the chance to replace every shareholder council member. I think to date there's only been 1 or 2 changes over the last 7 years. The Shareholders' Council, you've got to remember, with the government as well on there, they control around close to 80% of the shares of LGFA, the entity. So you do want to have a very strong representation from your larger shareholders. Those 80% probably control about 65% of the guarantee as well too.
So that's one of the criteria
it's not the criteria, but it's really important to actually realise the significance of the Shareholders' Council.
And outside of that, it rotates through those bigger...
any council can nominate themselves to go on, so long as they're a shareholder, can actually go on to it. So we've got 30 councils as shareholders. Plus the Crown. So of those 30 councils, I think it's 9 or 10 are actually on there at the moment.
And that does happen every 5 years?
No, every year. Every year, two come up.
Okay, cool. That's cool. So, so it's sort of follow on from Councillor Thompson's question. There's an opportunity here for us to have a look at this and have a potentially an alternative view next time, maybe not.
Just to add to what Mark said, so as a shareholder council member, I have other councils that I talk to on a regular basis to make sure that I have their views, any concerns they might have, any ideas, any information, whatever they want to share with me that I can take back to the shareholder council. I always, every year, and we're asked to ask our councils that we look after in terms of the comms, is like, are there any of the councils willing to put up a member for the shareholder council? And I'd have to say, unfortunately, it's always slim pickings. So, but to
well, that might change.
Yeah, it might.
Just wondering how and when it might change.
But to Mark's point, and on the Shareholders' Council, we have a member that is represented from one of the smaller councils. Smaller councils have different challenges, and their request sometimes to discuss different topics or go down a particular route might be advantageous to a smaller council, but not so much for the larger councils. So it sort of talks to Mark's point about from a strategic perspective and a governing perspective, it's really important to represent on the shareholders' council the larger councils that have the bigger challenges.
Or potentially the big growth councils.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you. It's a couple of questions for David. So can you just explain to me what the context of the impact of our decision making today will be on the overall decision making around these matters for the LGFAs? So we are...
We have one vote,
Right.
so of all the shareholding councils.
Okay,
so.
cool. Thank you. And secondly, I'm just sort of trying to navigate my way through the reasons for the increase in directors' fees and welcome extra explanation, but it seems to me that the main reason that Board Dynamics has suggested is that basically it's gone to market and done some research and said, well, you know, this is what's currently happening apart from the big banks and this is what we recommend. So is that largely the reason?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of analytics in there as well, but again, when you think about the niche area of the LGFA in terms of the pool of directors available, they've taken that into account. The shareholder council had a presentation from Board Dynamics, and we questioned them thoroughly on that, and that's your sum up is exactly where theirs was in terms of the directors not having had an increase since 2017, and the current state of the market, and what would be appropriate remuneration for the directors.
Okay, thank you. Well, sort of if I may, just poses one more question for me, and it kind of lines up a little bit with Councillor Thompson, and that is, if the pool is such a risk, and I've heard a similar kind of rationale in other board contexts that, you know, it's niche, it's this and it's that, and we really need to take what we get because there ain't a lot around. But I actually challenge that, and if this is a risk and it's known, then what sort of work is being done, what sort of succession planning? But I would challenge that, and that there are people there, you've just got to look for them. I mean, as I said, I've heard that.
Sure.
That excuse in other contexts as well. Yeah.
Yeah. You got anything you want to add to?
Yeah. I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's just a statement of fact. You've also got to look at the fact that we have 7 staff. That's all we have. We have 6 directors, of which 5 are independent. And it's really important to protect the interests of the guarantors, that you have the strongest, most independent people on that board, because they're representing you. And the last thing you want, or anyone wants, is that guarantee to be called upon or for the agency to get into strife. Mm-hmm. So that's important. I think 4 out of the 6 directors are going to come off in the next 4 years. So we are going to start to see a rotation off going forward. So the remuneration is not pitched above market, it's actually pitched at market. So it's not like we're actually remunerating directors more than what the stats actually would actually suggest. So as I sort of said, the people are their business. It's not so much the assets, and it's the fact that you've got to have strong governance. So to pay what you would say would probably be a little bit extra than what they maybe deserve, I think is actually warranted given the size of the business and given the complexity and the technical nature of it.
And look, I would imagine that every board has the same sort of response, because, you know, your capacity and what you're capable of delivering and achieving is going to reflect directly on the quality or the how you approach your board. How often would we expect to be reviewing remuneration then for directors? So it's been 2 years since, but we'll be looking at another one in the next 2 years?
I would think so, because unfortunately the Constitution isn't set up right. It would ideally be better that you had CPI increases for a number of years and then you have a market review at a much later stage. So
I think it's been so far every 2 years that we've had a REM review and then recommendations as a result of it.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, that's all good questions for a deeper conversation at some stage. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. I've just been recommended by Councillor Ewan that we could potentially be putting in an amendment in terms of the motion here to receive this report, that David does come back to us and reports to Council on the issue of mentorship or what the LGFA might be doing in terms of diversity on the board and what that long-term plan will look like. In terms of process here.
Yeah, you can. Is that an issue in the short term, David, or in terms of providing? Because I know that there is a lot of work going on at the top government level on women on boards and empowering women and training women for the next to be chairs of the bigger boards, which is going on, which is great. But is that going to be an issue? I'm happy to take it as an amendment, but are you going to be able to deal with it?
I think, can I jump in on this one?
Sure.
I think it's a really warrantable request. We don't need an amendment, we're just going to do it. So one of the things we want to do as part of our CCO policy, look at what we do in terms of encouraging diversity in all aspects as well. So we'll have a briefing from Mark at some stage specifically regarding the LGFA, and he can canvass the conversation ahead with the board at that discussion when he comes back. Don't need an amendment for that, but also I'll be talking to the chair and the deputy chair of the ED committee to discuss our diversity expectations on our CCO boards as well, which will be another conversation as well. So no amendment required, unless you feel you'd like to put an amendment up.
Or if it's recorded in the minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's have it recorded in the minutes and put it in that wider context that we've been talking about, and Margaret was alluding to in your questions, which is that whole board representation and how it's derived, so that we can understand and be in a better position next time it comes to us to make relevant decisions that as we feel fit would be good. Is everybody happy with that?
Yep.
Yep. Councillor Bunting.
No, I actually think my question might be better in debate, actually.
In debate?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so thank you. We have a set of recommendations, as you can see. I'm happy to move. Is there a seconder? Councillor McPherson, thank you. We're going to go into debate because I understand there is a little bit of discussion. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, just briefly, congratulations on the work you've done for us, and we feel a safe pair of hands. And certainly, my comments that I'm about to make don't cast aspersions on any of the membership or the talent. I fully appreciate the specialisation, the high degree of candidate we need. But I think as a council, we need to start looking very closely at the self-sourcing pudding that is the directors' fees, because as this goes up, this becomes a part of the pudding. And because these directors' fees went up, everyone else's directors' fees go up, etc. And I'd be really interested, because we get charged with this kind of stuff a lot of time with directors' salaries, and we're the ones that get it in the neck as an elected wing. So I'd be very interested in just challenging that model of remuneration increases in the future. But otherwise, I'm happy to support this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those comments. Is there anybody else? No? And in the discussion? We'll go to vote on the board.
The motion is carried, 12 for, 1 against.
Okay, thank you, councillors. That brings us to an end. We're going into a workshops at 11, which gives us 20 minutes to bring forward your discussion. Angela, Martin? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. So we're in committee room 1, aren't we?
No, we're going to stay in here.
Oh, we're going to stay in here. So you've got till 11 to go off and get a decent standard coffee, and we might go into committee room 1 with Angela and Martin. Where are you doing that?